stand over here, right in the middle of the title, just to introduce this session. So my name is Ruth Boumphrey. I am the Chief Executive of Lloyd's Register Foundation. We're a global charity with a mission to promote safety of life and property and also public education. And so this is a session that's very close to my heart.
Yeah,
so,
smashed it. Yeah, I'm just going to grab my stuff.
Smashing. All right. So, I think there's somebody with a mic on at the back.
Safety, something.
Or I'm getting online commentary on what I'm saying already.
Is everyone being okay?
Okay. All right, super. So today's session is safety first and AI innovation and deployment. Now, I noticed Lydia said the line between it, and I don't like to think in terms of lines. I'm sure there's a lot of mathematicians in the audience who don't also think in terms of lines, but probabilities and density clouds and all sorts of things. So let's not think about it as a line, but let's think about it as some sort of space. And what we're going to do today is explore the tensions between the benefits and the risks to AI for safety. Why is this subject important, and why does the foundation that I'm the CEO of care about it? Well, we all depend on infrastructure. You know, we came here today, we're dependent on hidden infrastructure systems of energy, food, water, transportation, and these are all hidden, but they're all very highly technically driven. And the more that we have new innovations and new technologies, the more that these systems have to prove themselves in order to keep us safe. New technology can bring enormous benefits to such systems, but they can also bring their risks. So today is all about that sort of what are the benefits and what are the risks, and how do we find a place where we can regulate and we can bring things in safely. So think about those benefits. There are 200,000 new people being born every day on this planet. You know, that's a new Birmingham every week. And then we have to clothe, bring energy, bring transport, bring food. And AI can help us on that journey. We can maximize those benefits, not only in bringing us new products and services, but also thinking about the kind of jobs that people do today that are dirty, dangerous, and repetitive jobs. AI can help replace some of those. So our motivation as a foundation is very much towards the benefits that AI can bring, and we've brought a lot of research, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But we must also acknowledge that there are risks as well. But this technology has to be in service to people. If we don't put people at the center, then we've completely failed in what we're trying to do. So, more resilient and secure infrastructures which meet our needs and take people out of harm's way, keeping them safe. So if we look at this word safety, which is an interesting word, we talk about it a lot in the foundation, there are many different angles to that. So what is safety? Well, safety fundamentally is part of our psychological safety. You can't function as a human being if you don't have some element of psychological safety. So trust and perception is a very important element to feel safe. Then you think about actual harms, you know, things can produce actual harms which are in the short or the long term. And safety is also the avoidance of harms. So sometimes you can't measure what you're trying to prevent because AI is there are new technologies, and you can't always say, right, this is what we're trying to, this is the benchmark. There aren't benchmarks for safety in the same way that there are for other things. Then we're also thinking about equity. So who are the winners and losers as we deploy new technologies? Because usually there are winners and losers, and we're trying to sort of optimize onto the winners, right? So equity is a very important thing that we have to consider in safety, because things which make us safer may also make other people less safe, and so let's just consider that. And then also, of course, use cases of AI. So the Financial Times had a very interesting front page a couple of days ago on a scientific gathering which was looking about the sort of new Cold War in AI and saying that actually we need to work collaboratively across the world if we are going to keep us on track so that the use cases of AI are positive for mankind and don't spiral out of control. So very, very timely. And finally, what I want to just talk about is our foundation and what our foundation is doing in this space. And I'm very glad that we have people joining us on the panel today who've all been associated with our foundation's work in different ways. So our foundation has two principal methods that we're trying to contribute into this debate. The first is about evidence and insight. So what is the evidence and insight that we can bring to bear to help inform a better dialogue? One of the things that we produce is something called the World Risk Poll. And in that World Risk Poll, we go out to 125,000 people around the world, over 80 different countries. We ask people about their experiences, their perceptions, and their experience of harm, and also who they trust to be able to keep them safe. And in that poll last time, when we last ran it in 2021, we asked about a question about, do you think AI will be mostly harmful or mostly helpful to you? And less than 2 out of 5 people said it would be helpful. So there's a load of distrust in the world around what AI can bring to life, right? And then if we break those data down even further, well, we looked at whereabouts in the world think it would be mostly helpful. And we saw that the results were much higher in East Asia. And East Asia is, of course, where many of the developments of AI are taking place, where many of the drivers and many of the benefits in terms of economics of AI are being felt. And the people who are most distrustful of AI were in Africa and South Asia. So if you think about the equity in the system, sometimes equity also drives our opinions on things. It's something we have to really think about as we take forward the way that we implement AI in our systems. Other types of insight that we bring are through our foresight reviews, and I've brought one on stage with me today. We do these sort of simple foresight reviews, and I'm not going to give you the contents at all, but I'm going to direct you towards them on our website. We have done foresight reviews on the cybersecurity for the industrial Internet of Things, cybersecurity on new regulation, how do we regulate in this new world. We've done foresight reviews on robotics and autonomous systems, and we're about to set off on a new foresight review looking at different types of new AI methods and what they can bring to safety. So do encourage you to sort of contact us and lean into that if you're interested in that. Those foresight reviews have many different recommendations, and before I introduce our first speaker, I just want to tell you about, as we go into those recommendations from our foresight reviews, then we fund things. We fund research, we fund new skills, we fund new programs and new communications challenges as well. And when we did our foresight review on robotics and autonomous systems, we found that actually the thing that they said was going to bring most benefit, taking people out of dirty, dangerous situations, that there is a block to the market, and that market, the blocker, was the fact that regulators did not know how to regulate the new technologies coming forward. So it was a very strong message that we got from entrepreneurs and from the technologists that without regulators getting on board and understanding where we were going to go, we couldn't bring the safety benefits that we know can come from AI and different types of autonomy. And that's why we commissioned the University of York to look at this. And I'm very glad that our sort of first panelist today comes from the University of York. So I'm going to sit down now. This is just like my living room. It's much nicer than my living room. And the way we're going to run this session today is that we're going to have a discussion. We're going to have some opening remarks from our panelists. And then we're going to open it up to the floor for questions or comments and have a little, the middle part of this session will be all the discussion with you, and then we'll finish it up here on stage. Okay? So thank you. Professor Ibrahim Habli from the University of York, you're from Research Director at the Institute for Safe Autonomy. I want you to start us off with a very big question, which is, what does it mean for AI to be safe?
Okay, thank you, Ruth. So let one of the academics deal with the semantics first. So as you know, language matters as we keep being reminded. And if you ask a safety professional, what does it mean for AI to be safe? Their first answer will be, it depends. And which is right. It depends on the nature of the technology. It depends on who's using it and for what purpose. But let me be more helpful here and offer you a definition, and which is consistent with how you presented safety, Ruth, which is AI safety is freedom from harms caused by the use of AI. And let me unpack it, starting with the first part of it, which is freedom from harms. And the first thing which comes to our mind is, what kinds of harm are we talking about here? Because historically, the field of safety and safety science focused on physical harms, damage to property, and importantly, human health. But in the last 20 years or so, the field evolved, and we've started to consider other kinds of harms, psychological harms, as well as environmental harms, which is a good move. But AI is stretching things further, and now we have other kinds of very significant harms, social, political, legal, as well as moral. And we heard yesterday about new kinds of harms to do with discrimination, bias, as well as threats to democratic institutions. And the question for us is, how expansive should we be with defining safety and safety of AI? Should we cover all of those kinds of harms and dilute potentially safety? Or be too limited and potentially miss some kinds of significant harms? So that's obviously for discussion. The second part of my definition, caused by the use of AI, it has a key term, which is causation, which is very difficult, but very important, because without establishing causation, it's very hard to allocate moral responsibility and ascribe legal liability, which are very important for this kind of very beneficial but powerful technology. And therefore, we have to consider the full pipeline from data collection and curation all the way to deployment and through life. Otherwise, we have the problem of imbalance, which is when we talk about benefits, we bring technologists to the stage and we have great photos with them. When it comes to actual harm, we bring the end users, the clinicians, the pilots, and drivers. We'll ask them, why did you press the button? And therefore, we are treating them potentially as liability sinks, which is very dangerous because these are the professionals we need to trust for our own safety. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. The final bit of it is, I'm not talking about safety of AI, because AI is a piece of code. It's just an algorithm. It's not going to hurt anyone. It's used well. And that's where, again, we need to bring back to the stage the end users, the clinicians, doctors, as well as engineers, those who are going to take the technology and fit it into their products as engineers, teachers into their practices, into classrooms, as well as clinicians to their again, clinical practice. And therefore, these should be first-class stakeholders, not people invited to fringe events. They should be on the stage. Is my definition good enough? Freedom from harm caused by the use of AI. My fellow safety professionals or researchers will say, no. I missed a very, very important term there, which is risk. Because risk moderates safety. Because we don't have absolute safety. Unless you're a politician, you don't talk about absolute safety. And that's how we moderate safety, which is we insert two important parameters: the likelihood of harm, the chance, or sometimes it's not a chance, it's engineered, as well as the severity. And that helps us unpack the current discussion, especially around existential risks, because there people are fixated on severity and the dreadful effects of being eliminated by killer robots. So it's newsworthy, and the perception of risk is very, very, very high. What's the likelihood? That's the question. Are there any good model to predict these? Well, good luck. But then if you look at the use of AI in beneficial domains, like healthcare, you see that the risk is higher because the environment is very complex, and the likelihood of harm is higher when you disrupt a complex system. And therefore, the risk there is higher than the existential risk we talk about. And that's where the term risk is very important. The final term here I want to insert into my definition is acceptability. Because we don't talk about risk in general, because when we talk about risk, someone would say, is it acceptable? And acceptable to whom? And given what? And given what other resources? And that's the question of equity, as Ruth already indicated. And therefore, the next question for us is, when we talk about benefits and harms, is about distribution and whether the distribution of harms and benefits is equitable across all affected stakeholders. And therefore, let me conclude with my expanded definition now, which is freedom from unacceptable risk of harm caused by the use of AI. And there you have 7 ingredients which can help us have some informed discussions before jumping into more hyped and trendy terms like issues to do with red teaming or certain kinds of testings, because these serve the purpose but they're supportive rather than at the heart of it. So that's my starting definition.
Thank you so much, Ibrahim. I hope somebody wrote that down because I'm going to need to use that definition later. I'm going to turn now to Ray. Ray Eitel-Porter is from Accenture, where you are the lead for responsible AI. And Ray, I know you've been working across different sort of sectors. Could you tell us what you think we can learn from the government's approach to regulating or other sectors which are high technology, like social media, for example?
Yes, my role over the last sort of 6 or 7 years has been working to design and implement Accenture's own internal AI compliance program, which effectively is a safety system for the use of AI, and also working with clients to help them set up the same kinds of systems around governance and controls and the technical underpinnings, etc., to keep their use of AI safe. I think social media is a really illustrative example for us to learn from. And actually, if I think about Ibrahim's definition, I think the negative consequences, which most of us would recognize with social media, tick many of the boxes that you listed, within your definition. If I think about, mental health impact, I think about impact on elections, I think about propagation of extremist views and pornography. There's a pretty long list of things that aren't great about social media. Now, I'm not suggesting that this is intentional on the part of the social media companies, although the algorithms which are very effective at propagating this kind of content are very much intentional, but the consequences are unintended. I think the challenge is that there is no financial incentive for these organizations to curb these types of harms. And yet, we still lack comprehensive regulatory controls for social media. And I was actually talking to a prominent regulator and politician last week about this topic and asked them, well, what do you think we should do for social media? And he said, well, I think the only real answer would be to ban it completely and start again from scratch. But obviously, that's not going to happen, right? Because once the horse is bolted, it's much harder to go back again. Which is why I think we need to act now in terms of AI. And I think we need comprehensive and rigorous testing before powerful solutions with such huge societal reach and impact are actually released. And I think this testing should be independent, and I think that AI should be licensed as a result of the testing. This wasn't the case with social media, but I think it should be the case with AI. We do it in transport, we do it for electrical goods, we do it in so many different areas of our life where there's a significant impact or potential impact on people. So why should AI be different? Now, I admit that this might slow things down a little bit, but is that necessarily a bad thing? I think it would be a bad thing if it were applied to one particular company. If one individual company were slowed down at the expense of others, that clearly wouldn't be good. And that's why I think that voluntary approaches are unlikely to work. But if you have regulation which applies across the board to organizations and imposes this kind of testing, then I think that would be very beneficial. Yes, we might have to wait a few months longer before we get the next version of ChatGPT, but is that actually a problem if we have much greater confidence in the safety of the system when it's actually released? And if I think about the companies that we work with today in the field of AI, but particularly top of mind is generative AI at the moment, the big concern for everyone is how do we deploy any solution safely? And there's huge amount of effort going into testing and trying to figure out ways to deploy the systems safely, and that takes a long time. If we had a lot more confidence in the underlying system, we would be a lot quicker in actually developing and deploying applications built on top of it. So I think there'd be a benefit actually across the board for everyone if much more safety were built in from the start.
Thank you so much, Ray. And I think that leads nicely into our last speaker today, our last panelist, Alexandra. Professor Alexandra Brintrup is Professor of Digital Manufacturing at the University of Cambridge. And you work on implementing AI in supply chain. So you're at that point, Ibrahim and Ray have already talked about it. The key stakeholders, people are going to be using it and benefiting from it. So why are you worried about AI safety?
So AI is set to have an impact in many, many fields, and manufacturing, engineering, and supply chains is one of them. Manufacturing is inherently a very safety-conscious, conservative field, but at the same time, manufacturers are at the forefront, really, for adoption of AI in order to increase productivity. I really liked Ibrahim's, discussion and point on safety now becoming a bigger concept, really, that needs to encompass not only physical harm, but also mental harm, harm to well-being of human beings. And now manufacturing engineers, when they are thinking of adopting AI, they need to start going out of their comfort zone, and they need to consider, how is this going to impact the well-being of my workers? So it's not something traditionally that is thought of in the shop floors in manufacturing engineering, when people associate safety with physical harm from assembly lines and from automated systems. So manufacturers are paying a lot of attention to AI, but also they are trying to navigate a very rapidly changing landscape with almost no guidance, regulatory guidance in particular. And we are starting to see alarming use cases. Many of these, they are just happening through the grapevine, word of mouth, and they are not making it into media. But those they do, they seem to be quite important use cases that we need to pay attention to. So, for example, recently we have heard of worker data being gathered on the shop floor during COVID, which was primarily gathered to prevent, to monitor health and safety, but was then later repurposed to prevent unionization, and the means to do that was to reschedule workers on the production line so that they are not next to each other. So high-risk unionization workers weren't next to each other. We also know of cases where AI startups are under pressure to push products into the market, and they have no time to really stop and devote 6 months to correct biased data, so they release it. We are also starting to see cases where accountability over AI software is becoming contested. There was a recent case, you might have seen it on the news, where an airline's chatbot was giving wrong information to a customer, which then led him to buy an overpriced ticket. When he applied for a refund, thankfully he had screenshots. The company denied responsibility and claimed that the chatbot was its own legal entity. And when you see solid, so it was resolved in the end, and there is now a legal precedent, thankfully, that hopefully will be put to use for good later on. But you can see the temptation, and which is really where regulation needs to come in, and I very much agree with Ray on that. And regulating for accountability really is a big issue. So for many manufacturing companies, the skill set to develop and scrutinize AI models is lacking, so they outsource development. I mean, if you think about the UK, over 90% of manufacturers are SMEs, and they are firefighting, and they don't have the resources to devote to scrutinize AI models. So they will take the word of the software developer. And if you think about software supply chains, even the software developer that they rely on might be reusing code from elsewhere. So how do you attribute responsibility? And it becomes very, very hard to trace. And I think finally, as AI moves into, from the shop floor into more white-collar jobs in manufacturing, we will increasingly start seeing the tension between human agency and AI agency, especially in situations where tacit knowledge and human intuition can't be encoded into an algorithm. So if we think about maybe, a model, for example, helping a procurement officer to select a supplier, then mathematically, a supplier might be the best option. But the human intuition that the procurement officer has developed over the year through his or her experience and working with that supplier over many years, that can't be encoded. So I think appropriate feedback mechanisms need to be put in place very soon in order to take action to resolve those sorts of tensions, and that needs to be taken very seriously across all levels of development. So it's very much a regulatory as well as, organizational responsibility.
Thank you so much, Alexandra, and really interesting to hear those examples that you've pulled out, and also quite worrying as well. Right, we're going to open up for discussion now. I'm just going to stop myself being blinded. And we would welcome questions or comments from the audience, and there's loads of hands going up. So there's a roaming mic, is there? Wonderful. We're going to start over here, move to the middle, move over there, and move our way backwards. All right. Can we keep it, there's a lot of hands went up, so please can we keep it quite brief, and the responses quite briefly. Thank you.
Thank you. Over the last, yesterday and this morning, I've been noticing that the scale of development of AI, for me, reaches a potential terminal velocity by the human ability to adapt and change quicker than the technology developing itself. To what extent do you see AI safety both being a contributor to that terminal velocity being reached, but also actually an enabler for human beings through trust arriving for actually human beings to be able to change and adapt quicker?
Gosh, that's a really good question, isn't it? Good existential question as well. Would anyone like to start off on that?
I'll make a start. I think that point was reached at least 2 years ago. Let me give you an example. 5 years ago, the then Health Secretary announced £250 million investment in AI into the NHS. And the investment, most of it went to technology companies, which is good. But then 2 years ago, they reached stage 4, where they need to start deploying, and they've started thinking about safety. It was too late. And therefore, now there's a long queue of technologists waiting to be assessed from a health economics point of view. Is it going to add value? In many cases, they won't. That's something you should have done before. And for safety evidence, which is very, very expensive to collect now. And that's where safety first. Safety needs to start earlier, because it's not just more effective, it's more efficient. So I think this long queue has started a while ago, but now we're hitting that point. And thankfully, people are talking about safety now. But I hope they mean safety, not something else.
Thank you so much, Ibrahim. I'm going to keep moving. If you do want a wider explanation for that, our foresight reviews also talk about its inability to sort of keep up. But very good thing to hold in our heads that safety does have to come first and can help on that journey. It can help make things faster. So we're going to go here, 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 and then there. And then we're going to move our way back. Sorry, we're going to do this in a linear sequence so that our poor mic holder doesn't get too run around.
Thank you. When you talk about safety, I mean, you already said there are many other industries who's been doing that for decades.
Yes.
For example, pharmaceutical industries, of course, not perfect, but they have to go through very clear 4 stages.
Yes.
And why, is it any tendency to learn, or we are so clever, we are going our own way?
Okay.
I'm talking about from the decision makers.
Yeah, super, thank you. Does anyone want to try that one? Yeah.
I mean, just one additional comment to that. I think that having a culture of safety in an organization is so important. If I think about the airline industry, one of the amazing things about it is there is not a culture of blame if there's any accident. It's a culture of everybody comes together, intense scrutiny as to what went wrong, but not to point the finger at somebody, but to figure out why did it go wrong, how do we learn from it, how do we feed it back into the system. And that isn't necessarily the case in medicine in some areas because of the risk of liability and these sorts of things. And I think it's critical that companies and organizations and government breed this culture of safety first by design, exactly as Ibrahim said. That's absolutely critical that we build it in from the beginning.
Thank you. And in addition, those high safety sectors are also using AI to help them be even safer, because AI can contribute to the conditions of safety. So we're going to go here and then there. Thank you.
So we often describe complex neural networks, right, as black box, because we struggle to have that explainability and traceability. Some say, okay, they know what's going on inside 80%, but 20% I don't know, right? So in a situation like that, and we don't see that probably improving in the next immediate term. So without passing the risk to the end user or the customer, what is your recommendation to manage that risk within the organization?
Does anyone want to try that one? I'm kind of looking at you a bit, Ibrahim.
Yeah, I'm happy to take it. So
there's a complex system.
Sure. Let's stick with aviation, as Ray indicated. So we rarely depend on one technology.
Yeah.
So think about any aircraft, which is your favorite. There is a high degree of redundancy. We talk about triple modular redundancy, and and then we have two of them. And therefore, this idea that we have AI is going to solve all of these problems is just fiction, because AI is one component in a very, very complex system. And therefore, if we keep pumping more funding into just AI, but not thinking about it as an engineered system, we're just wasting resources, because ultimately someone has to engineer the bigger system. And that's where you start thinking about other technologies, which are backups or wrappers around AI. And that's how we can start reaping the benefits of AI in terms of new capabilities, but also making things safer. But this fixation of end-to-end machine learning, we need just some cure of that disease. It's an answer, not the answer.
Okay, thank you. And Alexandra, you also.
I just wanted to pick up on your comment on explainability. I think there are, it's also very tempting for us to go back to AI solutions for AI to explain itself. Right, so there are many statistical methods, many AI-based methods that are emerging to enable AI to be more interpretable, AI to explain itself, even unroll AI models. So machine unlearning is one of those, one of the newer areas to read models from unwanted data and bias and so on. So that is very tempting, and it is useful, but it is useful to a certain extent. We need to always work with I think with the domain owners in order to be able to inject safety, to make sure that it is AI is safe and it doesn't harm human well-being.
Thank you.
So I would say safety first, but also humans first.
Thank you. And I love these descriptions around black box models. Now, of course, right across all the sciences, we all live in a black box model. We all live in complex systems which are highly unpredictable, whether or not that's AI generated or not. So philosophically, I like to think I'm in a black box model in my life. Over here, thank you.
Hello, sorry, yes. My quick questions to both Ruth and Ray. Ruth, I really liked what you said about the human at the center of AI technology development. And my question relates to the equity in AI you talked about. So we have this made in California approach that perpetuates inequity in AI. So my question is, what is Lloyd's Register Foundation doing about it? That's my one question. And to Ray, you talked about earlier about doing rigorous testing to make sure it doesn't cause harm. But that sounds to me like a traditional safe method. Shouldn't we start with the the research question, the developmental motto to say, for example, if we are creating a chat box, the first thing we should be saying is, before we even develop a single code, shouldn't we be saying, this chat box will not harm children, for example? We start with that and then develop the rest of the sort of the journey. What do you think about that? That's all.
Okay, thank you so much for your question. Just, I love talking about my job and Lloyd's Register Foundation. So the first thing is something I talked about, which is the World Risk Poll. And what we see when we go out, to, it's over 120 countries actually. We're in partnership with Gallup and we're asking people what is their perceptions of risk, what is their experience of risk, and who do they trust? Now, we're going to countries where they don't even have national censuses or anything like that, and it's, I think about it as giving voice to the world, right? So in countries like the UK, like the USA, there's very well-developed systems of data gathering, opinion gathering. It feels like everyone's thinking about what does a UK or a USA person think. What our World Risk Poll is doing is giving a voice to people who don't get asked, who don't get to report their data, who don't get, when they get injured at work, no one even hears about it. And so that's a contribution that we're making, which we hope other people will pick up and use. But in addition, in the foundation, we're taking a locally led approach. We're moving much towards a locally led approach. And there are issues about equity and injustice which come out of that poll. And we ask ourselves, well, where can we make the biggest difference? The biggest difference we can make is not in the UK and not in the USA, but it's in parts of the world that we're hearing through the World Risk Poll are much more liable to be harmed, whether it's by traditional harms or new types of harm. And so what we're doing is establishing networks of people in those countries who can tell us what is needed locally rather than us telling them. So I completely get that technologies, maybe in California, actually, I'll be looking further east, as well. I think, that there's great innovation coming, but we also want to unlock that innovation from other parts of the world and for other parts of the world as well. Over to you, Ray, for your part of the question.
Simple answer, I completely agree. I think that we should be asking the question before we develop or use AI in a particular scenario, is it appropriate to use AI in this particular scenario? Is it safe to do so? And then we should be building in design right from the beginning. And I think that was consistent comment from, across the panel here that we've kind of got ourselves into a situation where the only possible route in many cases now is to add the testing and add things on top of it. But we should go back to the beginning. I think it's also what Dame Angela McLean was saying yesterday about, the rigorous scientific method being applied to the development of AI, which hasn't necessarily been the case up to now.
Thank you. There is a question along at the front, and then we're going to start moving backwards. Thank you, everyone. You're keeping this really good and to the point. I really like it. Thank you.
Thank you. The panel noted how regulation seems to be prominent for safety with AI use. Do you think, so legislation comes from Parliament, do you think there is appetite from the legislator that shares that same very sensible approach that you've outlined there?
Do I like that one? Yes, go on then.
Yeah, I think it varies, there's huge geographic differences of opinion, which are also sort of cultural and social in nature. If you look across the world, different countries and regions are taking quite different approaches to regulation. You've got the EU, which is by far the most stringent. You've got the UK kind of somewhere in the middle, but vertical. And I think there's many people who might say that some kind of horizontal layer might be needed, a bit strong. They're moving to a stronger horizontal layer. The recent white paper was kind of more strong on the horizontal layer than the previous version. And then you've got the US, which is, broadly speaking, not regulated except in particular states and cities. I do think that standards have an important role to play, and I don't think we're going to influence much on the regulatory scene, but if we could get global agreement around ISO standards or other internationally recognized standards, then at least organizations would have a common standard, a common level to apply where they could have a higher degree of confidence.
Thank you for the question as well. I also want you to point you at our foresight review of regulatory systems, which looks at some of the more advanced regulators around the world and how they're approaching it. And just to build on Ray's point, we're a big believer of standards in the foundation, but the previous point, we need equity into those standards. The standards bodies mustn't be dominated by those who have the most to gain from these systems as well. So we're going to move backwards. We've got the lady there in the... is it ducks on your... It's beautiful. I love it. The lady with the duck.
Lots of ducks. Thanks very much. I'm Susie Madigan from Care International, which is a humanitarian aid organisation. How do we maintain a rational, globally informed conversation about AI safety, both about its definition and also operationalisation, and avoid it being derailed by the framing of this is about culture wars?
Anyone like to pick that up?
Yeah, it's participation and just ensuring that we invite diverse audiences and hear different voices, starting from the end users all the way to the developers, all the way to people who are curating the data. And there is movement towards that, and I think that's a starting point, which is bringing people whose safety we're talking about. And then starting there, starting with the technology. Although I'm a technologist, I'm a computer scientist, I'm passionate about the solutions, but we want solutions which are fit for purpose. And importantly, we need to figure out what that purpose is.
Did you have, because it sounds like you also have an answer in your head or a comment that you, on the back of your question, did you want to make a comment yourself?
Well, I mean, is this still working? Yes. I think there's a real danger that some of these really important questions around bias and who benefits and who doesn't benefit is currently being framed as sitting within culture wars, which just gets lots of people really angry and then completely misses the point. I think your solution about getting the right people in the room is absolutely critical. And so I think a huge gap at the moment is that we don't have members of Global South civil society in the decision-making spaces about the design, deployment, and governance of AI. And this is moving so quickly, and that has to critically change very, very quickly.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the insight. Just behind you, there's a gentleman there on the aisle who's got a question. We're going to have this question, and then one more question, and then we're going to go towards a wrap-up. Yeah.
Hi, thanks very much for the conversation. About regulation, this is more of a question, just an open question. A different opinion I've heard in terms of the strategy for regulation, in terms of regulating at the initial level, to only regulate at the end level, at the use case level. The argument, I think, being, not that this is my opinion, just putting it out there, I've heard it before, that as AI is a foundational technology and its uses are completely wide-ranging and actually very open in the future, we don't really know where it will go. So regulating it at that level can really limit it. And I think the analogy is if we see AI like the silicon, a chip, that you wouldn't regulate what someone does on a computer by regulating how the chip performs and try and block someone from accessing pornography or something from the level of the CPU. You regulate that from the end, the last level of them accessing the website. So do you think that's a good sort of, what do you think about that as a strategy for regulating AI?
We'll take a quick comment on that from anyone that wants to pick that up. Anyone?
Just a quick thing. It's just regulations should be risk-based. And if you look at practices at the moment, take health or aviation, you regulate the design as well as the use, so operational safety and design safety. And AI is not an exception. Why should we just focus on the use and not the design? So we need to be risk-based, depending on the criticality of the technology, as well as look at the different stages and insert regulations, as long as it doesn't disadvantage significantly innovation.
Okay. We're going to take, if the last question is very quick, there's a gentleman there. I'm really sorry about everyone else with their hands up that we didn't get to, just the nature of the session. If there's a quick question, and then we're going to come back to the panel for a sort of 30-second each wrap-up takeaway messages. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'll do my best. My name is Juraj Korba. I'm the chair of IGO OECD. Great pleasure to be here. On the issue of safety, the notion of safety normally implies technical solutions optimally. My question is, will this paradigm of safety suffice to cover the use of AI, which we may also understand as a new kind of symbolic economy? So how much can we rely on safety, and to what extent do we need new concepts? Thank you.
Great. Well, I'm just going to say no, we can't rely on it, but okay. Anyone else want to come in on that? Ray, you look like you're thinking.
I'm thinking, I think it is bigger than safety, yes. I mean, safety is a critical element, but we're going to have other, I guess it depends a little bit to Ibrahim's point about how do you define safety, but AI is going to have huge impact on society, the way we work, the way we need to be educated, many different ramifications, and I personally think they're going to come very quickly. So is that part of safety or not? I don't know, but I think we need definitely much broader debate and thinking about the impact of AI generally. Yeah.
Okay. Right, we're going to just finish up on the stage here, and I'm going to ask each of our panelists to just give us a sort of takeaway message of what you've learned or what you'd like us to take away from your own work. So Alexandra, I'm going to start with you.
I'm just thinking about some of the last final questions from the audience, and it is true that use cases in AI emerge, and we have unintended consequences, and they need to be really monitored. So it does pose difficulties when we try to approach to it from our previous frameworks in mind, such as, what is trustworthiness, what is safety, do we need to change our definitions? Yes, we need to change our definitions when it comes to AI, and we need to design AI a priori for the use cases that we know of, that they can do harm, but we also need to closely monitor it and watch it and put governance mechanisms in place in order to make that a continuous effort, both at the regulatory level and at the organizational level. So I think, yes, standards have a role to play, but there are certain cases with accountability, responsibility that regulation really needs to be there. So that conversation needs to be ongoing.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. Ray, your final thoughts?
So completely agree. I think regulation is really important. Safety shouldn't be optional. It needs to be regulated. And picking up on the comment from the gentleman there about foundation models, I understand the debate that says you should regulate the applications, but the problem is that with the way that foundation models have developed and the fact that they're not transparent and that people building on top of them don't understand and have access to the foundation model, if you don't regulate at that level, it makes it incredibly difficult for anyone building on top to be confident and safe. And if I draw a manufacturing analogy, we used to use mercury as a substance in many products. And that's banned now, or not used in most things, because it's inherently not safe. And so that's something that I think is analogous in this case.
I like that, an old school analogy. And Ibrahim, just final words from you then.
Building on Ray's point on transparency, the UK is a leader in one particular safety approach, which is safety cases, which is making your evidence and argument available for others to scrutinize. And when stakes are high, we ask for those safety cases to be sometimes publicly available. And given that AI is just one of the most beneficial but also high-risk technology, why don't we make safety cases for these interventions publicly available? And in many cases, most of the safety cases I've seen, they don't have much IP anyway. And maybe the private sector might object to this, but for publicly available services, why doesn't the government ask for providers to make their safety cases available? So we could learn, and we all become more accountable. So more transparency is key here.
Well, that's a great way to finish the session about transparency, accountability, and the public dialogue that we need to have. I want to thank everyone in this room for leaning in so much. It feels like you've been part of the stage today, and I want to thank our panelists and invite Lydia back up onto the stage. But thank you to everyone.